Hi. So, another one of your requests. We are going to be watching season one, episode one of Rhubarb and Custard. I have never seen this before. Let's watch together. All right.
Rhubarb lived in a house with a very sunny garden, with trees and bees and bone holes and things that sniffed good and things that bounced, and he enjoyed the way things were. For most of his life, Rhubarb had been eating chairs and shoes and holes in carpets and even a tree. But try as he might, he couldn't eat the rubber bands. All the birds in the garden ate rubber bands, but every time Rhubarb went out to ask them how they found them, they would just jump into the sky and float about. As Rhubarb watched from behind the curtains up at the house, a big fat crow with a big yellow spike plucked a big fat rubber band right out of the ground. Not 3 paws from where he was hiding. "They're spikes," grinned Rhubarb. "They stick their spikes into the ground and pull out the rubber bands. Now, why didn't you think of that?" "Oh, because you haven't got a spike. The next thing to being a bird," Rhubarb mumbled on in a knowing sort of way, "is being able to float about in the sky. And to find out how they do that, you'd have to get very close to one indeed. Now, what gets close to birds?" 6.5 weary hours later, still disguised as a huge piece of bread,
Okay.
the birds began to bounce very close to him. "This is it," chuckled Rhubarb. "My crummy plan is working."
Okay.
He lay still as still can be. "Aha! So that's how they bounce. This is fantastic. How clever you are." As all the birds bounced around, Rhubarb was able to see that they had very thin, flat arms, and that they would flap them with fury whenever they wanted to jump into the sky and float about. Rhubarb shook off his disguise as he decided the whole idea of being a piece of bread had gone a bit stale.
Well,
"Oh, you're so funny," he said to himself, as all the birds bounced up into the tree.
yeah.
Light shone from the only window in the shed, as Rhubarb was working on Mark I of a machine on which he'd pinned all his hopes of ever getting at the rubber bands. As the sun came up over the conker tree, the oddest, doggiest character stood in the shed doorway, and then very slowly he trundled out into the center of the
This
lawn.
is going really well.
All the early birds came into the garden and sat in Rhubarb's tree and squeaked with excitement at the new strange sight.
Yeah.
As Rhubarb reached the shade, he stood for a while, as all great dogs do before embarking up the wrong tree.
Yeah.
Climbing gingerly into the seat of the swing, Rhubarb checked all his equipment. "Flaps, spike, springs, all okay." Quietly at first, Rhubarb started to make the noise of the holiday jets that fly over the garden on sunny days.
Yes.
The sound he perfected during the night. As the sound got louder,
Practice.
he gently lifted his legs off the ground. "Springs up! We'll have lift off!" shouted Rhubarb in a muffled tone from under his huge yellow spike.
Well,
"This is a great step for dog kind." And as the wind whistled past his eyes and his little arms flapped with fury, Rhubarb felt himself being lifted higher and higher into the world beyond the 4 paws of dog. Rhubarb was so excited that he was the first dog ever to enter into flight, that he forgot to flap his cardboard wings.
well.
And so with the piercing scream of a jet changing into the screaming pierce of a dog, he plunged towards the garden. And his big yellow spike plopped into the green turf and into rubber band land. An hour later, poor Rhubarb was still furious as all the birds for miles about came bouncing along on their springs.
So close to success.
And even Custard, the big fat cat from next door,
Here
came
he
to
is.
laugh. Rhubarb was stuck. Birds have beaks, and Rhubarb had a spike.
Well,
And a beak is a beak, and a spike is a spike.
it is a spike. Insane. Complete, total insanity. I get why you guys love this. Okay, here. So first I'm thinking about the animation, right? Like this is very simple animation. This is not an Oliver Postgate animation. This is like something that looks like somebody drew it in a notebook and then just sort of like put the notebook up to a screen, right? So at first I was sort of like, yeah, like very simple block animation. But the story itself is so chaotic and like the the course of events is so insane that it's almost better that it's very simple. Like there's almost no background. Like it's just, the simplicity of the animation and the full on ridiculousness of the story. They work really well together. I loved the puns. I can see where like this would really speak to chaos agents, which when we're at a certain age, I think we all fall into that category. Dog owners, certainly. This was a very rhubarb heavy episode. The show I think is called Rhubarb and Ann Custard. I'm assuming the cat becomes a little bit, I don't know if this is a Tom and Jerry kind of situation. I don't know if they're friends, if they're frenemies, if they're nemesis. I do not know. But yeah, that's fully nuts. That is crazy. I loved it. That was great. Yeah, I'm going to be watching a little bit more of this. This is, yeah. Engineer-based insanity. Yeah. Thumbs up.